The government recently unveiled a new national education policy which will replace 34-year-old policy. The government has said the new policy is aimed at bringing transformational reforms in school and higher education systems to make India a global knowledge power. However, there has been criticism from some quarters to this new policy. Against this backdrop, Prime Minister Narendra Modi today said the NEP focuses on learning instead of studying. He said it is based on critical thinking rather than curriculum, with a special focus on passion, practicality, and performance. Today in the agenda, we will discuss this issue in detail. We have with us former Vice Chancellor of Delhi University, Professor Dinesh Singh, and Director of Schools in Uttar Pradesh, Mrs. Rita Singh. But before we start the conversation, let us have a look at this small report.
The new national education policy, which was unveiled by the union government recently, will help tackle the issues of brain drain and help India becomes a knowledge economy in the 21st century. Prime Minister Narendra Modi said today. He was referring to the policy which replaces the 34-year-old education system and is aimed at paving the way for transformational reforms in school and higher education systems to make India a global knowledge superpower. Prime Minister Modi, while addressing the Governors' Conference on the National Education Policy, virtually said the new education system removes the pressure on students for taking specific streams. To tackle brain drain, the NEP has paved the way for opening campuses of best international institutions in the country to bring them within reach of youth from simple families, he added. The Prime Minister urged the people to take the collective responsibility to implement the policy in letter and spirit. His comments came against the backdrop of criticism of the new policy and the manner in which it has unveiled. The West Bengal government today went to the extent of saying that they will not implement this policy in the state for the time being, as more discussions are needed on it. It has also been criticized by the parties like the Congress, DMK and Left, which claim that it will destroy the education system in the country and introduce a centralization, communalizations and commercialization. The Prime Minister meanwhile said that education policy like defense and foreign policies do not belong to any party but to the nation. But the debate and controversy over it continues. Bureau Report.
Now let's welcome our special guest, Professor Dinesh Singh and Mrs. Rita Singh. Welcome to the program, sir, and ma'am.
Thank you.
My first question is to Professor Dinesh Singh. So how do you see this national education policy? Because there is a lot of criticism, there are questions, there has been a debate going on. How do you see this?
Well, I am not too familiar with the criticisms because I'm quite familiar with the policy. And to my mind, this is a good policy. There are lots of good things in it. Nothing can be perfect, and the advantage with this policy is that there is room to experiment and innovate and improve as we go along. So I think even if there is some valid criticism, that could also be taken care of. But let me just tell you why I think it is a good policy.
Please.
First, a very personal reason. When I was Vice Chancellor at the University of Delhi in 2010 to 15, we implemented almost all the features that are given in this policy. So in some ways you could say, and we are not trying to be vain here or not looking for credit, but the policy is a sort of verbatim reproduction of what we did at Delhi University. And I can tell you from the experiment that we ran at that time that we had enormous success. So to my mind, this is a fairly valid reason to welcome the policy. But let me then tell you that some of the quickly some of the salient features. So this policy allows each student a degree of freedom to find his true inner self. अंतरात्मा की वो खोज कर सकेगा. How will that happen? और शिक्षा उसी को कहते हैं जो अंतरात्मा की खोज करके अंतर्ध्वनि को पकड़ ले और फिर संसार में उसके अनुकूल कदम करने चलने लगे तो वो प्रशिक्षित होने लगता है. And that is what this policy will allow, because one, it completely redefines education to my mind. It brings education and the real world together. It breaks away boundaries. It includes things that will allow a child to learn in a holistic environment. There will be transdisciplinarity. There will be hands-on learning. There will be project-based learning. The curriculum will be designed around the needs and challenges of society and of the nation. And each child can then find his or her path through enormous flexibility in the system. So, for instance, if you're studying Sanskrit and you have great interest in mathematics, not only can you study Sanskrit and mathematics, but through projects that you bring in, you can do something like a healthy transdisciplinary study of Sanskrit impacting mathematics, or mathematics impacting Sanskrit, somehow, somewhat like the fashion in which Noam Chomsky made these revolutionary discoveries in Sanskrit by combining in linguistics, by combining mathematics and Sanskrit. So this policy really allows you enormous freedom. I can tell you some other features if you like. For
Yeah,
instance,
please.
you know, at the University of Delhi, when I became Vice Chancellor, we did some data analysis and we figured out, no one had looked at it, that the annual dropout rate was 30%. About 23% students were dropping out at the end of the second year. And they had nothing to show for it. 2 years of effort would have gone in vain completely. In this policy, and we did that at Delhi University, this policy also does that. You can leave with a certificate or a diploma depending on whether you leave at the first year or the second year. And you can come back and complete your degree. That's a huge, huge gain for students. Lots of girls used to drop out for various personal reasons. Now they have a chance to come back. Their place would be assured. There is this other advantage. All our education is based on the blackboard. It is based on rote learning. It is based on creating silos so one subject doesn't know anything about the other. This will take away all these things. There will be much practicality, and skills and knowledge will be combined in a holistic fashion. So there is nothing like skills being inferior or superior to knowledge. They are both two sides of the same education coin. All these things will come in extremely handy when a student is trying to discover himself or herself. वो अपनी calling ढूंढ रहा है लाइफ में, तो एक्सपेरिमेंट करेगा, तमाम ध्वनियों को सुनेगा, समझेगा, तब उसको एक ध्वनि कोई है जो अंदर जाकर उसको गूंजेगी और उसकी अपनी अंतर्ध्वनि से वो तालमेल खाएगी और तब वो आगे बढ़ेगा. एक और गुण है इसके अंदर, एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप को बहुत जोर दिया गया है. अभी तक हमारे यहाँ सिर्फ जॉब सीकर्स ही तैयार किए जा रहे थे. हमने जब प्रयोग किया था और हमने एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप डाला, and then I saw with enormous satisfaction the kind of startups that undergraduates were coming out with. That was so good. And India needs entrepreneurship. University systems need to nurture an economic ecosystem around them. If you look at Cambridge, Oxford, Harvard, or Caltech or Stanford, they have billions and trillions of dollars of economic ecosystems around them because their knowledge is driving those startups and enterprises. You don't find that in India. In this policy, if a student comes up with an entrepreneurial idea based on his skills and knowledge and experiments, he will not only be allowed and helped, but it will also give him credit for his degree. That, I think, is remarkable.
So, sir,
all these things.
You spoke about so many salient features. Before I move on to Mrs. Singh, but I want to ask you some supplementary questions regarding, since you talked about Delhi University, what all you did, and also Sanskrit. DUTA is one of those who has criticized it, saying that it is an attack on education system. And one area of attack is Sanskrit being the third language. So please answer that before I move on to Ms. Singh.
I am not aware of any Sanskrit being any third language in any university. I don't think DUTA has read the document properly, or maybe we have not understood what they are trying to tell us. It's quite possible. There is no compulsion in any university to study Sanskrit as a third language. Please, I don't think this is the correct statement. I've seen the policy. There's nothing like that. At the university level, there is freedom. I think you'll study in whatever language the region you are in and English and maybe a combination like we do at Delhi University. The students who come in the Hindi medium are able to study a fair amount in the Hindi medium. I don't think there's any Sanskrit there.
Okay, let me ask Miss Singh. Mrs. Singh, how do you see it in the context of school education?
I would say the policy is frankly very progressive, and as Professor Dinesh also quoted as transformational. Truly so, but the fact is how much of transformation actually happens, it will actually depend on how it is implemented and what actually happens in the classrooms. So we in India have lost out on such lovely policies and such lovely commissions have been set up, and we have actually been very true leaders in the field of when the policies have been set up or the commissions have been set up and the kind of guidelines and the thought process has come out of these think tanks. We have many a times have failed when we have actually had time for implementation. So the entire NEP, how successful it will be in the hands of the, I think NCRT to begin with for now, because they will be working on the NCF and of course the higher education bodies, and later on how it actually transacts into the classrooms. However, there are certain very, very phenomenal changes that have brought in, which I think is going to be game changers. We all knew who actually studied child psychology or how that the brain development happened. We all knew that the maximum brain development happened between the age of 0 to 6. Even then, I don't know why we somehow lost out on these age groups. So for the first time, I see year 3 onwards being included into the formal education. That is one particular game changer, which is actually, I think I foresee a whole lot of changes due to this particular policy. And I see the policy is actually suggestive, or it gives a whole lot of guidelines for the state schools, for the Department of Education to take note of how these actually things will happen. When it talks about these curriculum related to early childhood care and education, it also talks about the sub-frameworks of curriculum for 0 to 3 years old. It is phenomenal. It actually will work as a guideline for parents as well, not just for the Anganwadis or those formal setups, even for the informal parenting for children who are at home. And then it talks about sub-frames of 3 to 8 years old, which will be taken up by the foundational years course curriculum. So I feel it is it not just suggests solutions. It not just suggests what is supposed to be done, it also suggests solutions. It also talks about that we have understood that each time when a child enters class 1, generally in first 1 month, 3 months or 4 months, the child feels very lost because he may not have had these foundational years of learning in any school or any formal setup. It also talks about Bal Vatika, which will be like a preparatory class where a child of say 5 years of age can take admission over there. Or it also talks about a simple small 3-month school preparation module which could be introduced in the class 1. So I feel there are not just the solution which have been given or how the policy should be implemented. There are various solutions. There is a mission. I mean, for the first time we are hearing a full-fledged national mission being set up for foundational literacy and numeracy. We are talking about achieving foundational literacy and numeracy by the year 23-25. To be able to achieve this, yes, there are certain steps, serious steps that the government will have to take, the education departments will have to be very serious. I think the whole game, whether it is successful, the whole scenario, whether it will change or not, will be in the how the implementation, the entire implementation goes. That's how.
Yeah, the whole scenario will change. Professor Singh, if I come back to you, some years back, the government had brought in the right to education.
Yes.
So, how is it better than that? Can you please elaborate on that?
Right to
No,
education.
I'm asking Professor Singh, Professor Dinesh Singh.
Whether it was Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan of
Mrs. Singh, I'm asking Professor Saab.
Sorry, continue.
She's also welcome to answer, but
No, she can answer after you. Yeah, after that I'll
No
ask
problem.
you.
After you, Professor.
After you.
So, first of all, the right to education only talks about your right to gain an education. Over here, I think they have added significantly to this by creating a platform and by in many ways even redefining school education and creating preschool environment for conducive education. I could have the right to education, but if I'm not prepared for it, if I'm not capable of handling the environment, as Rita ji said, a child could get lost in the first grade. This allows you to sort of glide in more naturally. So that I think would be well taken care of. But Ajay ji, I'd like to add something with your
Yeah,
permission.
please.
I think Rita ji hit the nail on the head when she said, of course, the real challenge is how you implement it, whether at the higher education level or the lower education.
Right.
And I don't mean by lower inferior, I mean school education. The real challenge is if we can get our teaching community, that's the most important part. We have to train,
How to teach the
reorient, and
teachers.
make them. Yeah, it is so important. And at the University of Delhi, we put in 2 years of effort to get our teachers to just teach the first years the way we believe they should be taught. So there was much less teaching and much more mentoring and group activity, and the teachers sort of receded from either writing on the blackboard all the time or dictating notes, and began to excite the students with many projects which were hands-on and transdisciplinary. That is also there at the school level. There is a huge reduction. They have called for reduction in curriculum. They have called for reduction in rote learning. If these things, and the teacher, the challenge is on the teacher, that they must follow this. They must make sure that rote learning should be taken away. And finally, they've also called for enlightened testing. That is so important. Our exams forever destroy the minds of our students. Here is a chance for us, to at least now get good exams which enable the student rather than disable the student. So to my mind, there is enormous scope, but as Rita ji said, the important thing is we have to learn and work hard to implement this in the right spirit.
Yeah, let me go now back to Mrs. Rita Singh. The same question about how is it better than RTE?
I think they're two different things. It was targeted, if I look at Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, and then later on, of course, it became Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, where the Madhyamik was also subsumed and teacher education was also subsumed. All these, including Right to Education Act, are, I would say, compliance oriented. They were well-meaning. Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan has been very successful to a large extent. It brought in accessibility of the schools to. But what happened while we are trying to increase the number of schools, and we tried to place whole lot of schools in the geographical locations close by where the civilizations or where the villages were. In the order to do the accessibility part, we lost out on the quality part. This is what I feel, and not just I feel, that the whole lot of surveys that have taken place bring out these kind of this kind of analysis. So somewhere down the line, what Professor Dinesh also tried to bring out, it will all depend on the quality. We have to forget about the rote learning, how the processes will take place. Suddenly, it's not just the missions or the commissions of the government. It is all how the pedagogy turns out, how we actually take into consideration the 21st century skills, how do we actually target on the experiential learning, how do we actually take the vocational education in true sense. If a person passes out of, say, secondary and is not really academic oriented, there shouldn't be any shame in he taking up any one of the vocational courses, so that at least his survival, his rosy roti is not taken away from him. So whole lot of, we keep saying these cliched words like dignity of labor or things like that, but until we do not really, that's what policy has done. I see policy is very well drafted, and at each stage it talks about how the vocational education would be exposed, how the children will be exposed to these people, how they can take it as a full-term course, or how they can just take it as a pastime course. Basically, whether when I pick up a carpentry at my middle school or say at secondary school, whether I take it as a life skill thing or do I take it as a full-fledged career, it all depends on what is my aptitude and what exactly is my strength. It could, at times, it is also because of the financially, the courses that you take up are not really viable to be taken up. There are a whole lot of realities. I mean, our India is a huge country. We have got variety of people and strata, so all those challenges will have to be met by the people.
Professor Dinesh Singh, since you have been the Vice Chancellor of Delhi University, One key element in this NEP is allowing the entry of foreign universities in India, which has been a issue of criticism. But I think it was under RTE also. How do you see that element
Well,
of that?
let me tell you, Ajay, that this bogey about foreign universities has been around for a long time. And let me assure you, I don't know of many foreign universities that are dying to come to India, number one. Number two, let us look at how this policy gives us the freedom to do such good things that we could start attracting students from abroad instead
Right.
of foreign universities. I'm telling you, at Delhi University, we were attracting students from Europe and America. They were coming here to gain credit for the program that we had launched. So if we do it in the right way, we could do that. And thirdly, if we really put our minds to it, because this is in many ways gives us better freedom than what many universities abroad do already. We could create such good things that we could set up campuses abroad ourselves and bring in fair amount of foreign exchange and stuff like that, and other things as cultural ambassadors of the country. So believe me, this policy gives us an enormous amount of freedom, much freedom. But there's one thing I want to add, Ajay.
Please.
You know, when I look at the statutes and acts of various universities in India, including Delhi University, there is nothing in our act or statutes which does not allow us to do what the policy is recommending. That is why we did it when I was Vice Chancellor also. The tragedy is that in India, somehow university systems have displayed such inertia that we have finally had to have the government bring a policy to make us conscious
Right.
of this effort. This should have happened by itself. And you know, how much do you want the government to keep asking you to do this or do that? And then when the government interferes, then you start complaining that they are interfering. So let this also be.
So I want your views also on one key element which I think is common aptitude test at the undergraduate level. How do you see that?
An aptitude test.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, my thing is this. I am not in favor of testing unless it is really enlightened. Otherwise, no test will be beneficial. I can tell you on record that the IIT entrance exam is harming the minds of our children and destroying school education. Tests can be very harmful. But if this test is designed in a good way, in an enlightened way, then it can be very beneficial. A test is only as good as the person who designs it. So अगर आप यहाँ हैं and the person you are testing is above here, how will you test the person?
Right.
Therefore, one has to be very careful when you do these things. Otherwise, in principle, I welcome it.
Okay, Mr. Rita Singh, I will ask you about about the mother tongue issue, which has been a matter of controversy. Some states are opposing, some governments are opposing, some parties are opposing. How do you see that?
I would say it has not really been well understood. So many times, I mean, we are very used to starting conversation in the drawing rooms without really reading the document. That's a tendency most of the people have. Why this controversy I've really not understood. Why? Because we all know that smaller children understand whenever we have to make any concept, make them understand a concept, they understand it much better in their own native language, the language that they are comfortable with. Here we're not really trying to say when we are in say Karnataka, we must speak in Kannada in the schools. This is not what is being told by the policy. What it is trying to bring out is small children till a class as low as primary, or say we are calling it now foundational years and these preparatory stage. In these classes, what they're trying to say is try to speak in the language which a child understands. The concept is again like we all know that rote learning is what is taking its toll in our education system. So to be able to have experiential learning or conceptual learning or developing real skills which are required to be successful or to understand any concept for that matter, you got to make the person understand. So very often in our classrooms, don't we resort to body language? We start dancing, teachers start enacting, emoting. What is all this? This is basically to let the person understand what I wish to communicate to that person. So the purpose is not just mother tongue. See, if I look at the culture and the development, all that, the focus on the classical languages and things like that, I totally agree to this. Why? Because India is such a rich and cultural country. We have so much to offer, and just because if we do not, we lose out our regional languages, and we do not stay in touch with the classical language, all this, the literature that is existing in India will get lost. That is one larger objective of the entire thing. But mother tongue, do not get confused with multilingualism, and this is only to,
Right.
I think it has really been well understood that the child development, the language development again happens in the initial years. So that is why maximum languages must be brought in the initial years. And when they talk about mother tongue or the native language, it is only for the child to feel comfortable into the classrooms, so that he feels nice and understand every sentence, every nuance, everything that happens in the classroom. That's the only purpose. It's not regionalism
Right.
or nationalism that people.
We are running out of time. One last comment from Professor Dinesh. Sir, I want to ask, Prime Minister Narendra Modi today said that NEP is aimed at bringing about knowledge economy. Do you agree with that, and how it can?
100%. I just told you, if you look at Stanford, Caltech, MIT, Cambridge, Oxford, Imperial College, they support economic ecosystems which run into billions and even trillions of dollars directly stemming from the knowledge output of the university systems. If you look at all my lectures and writings of the last 7-8 years, I have consistently said India needs a knowledge economy. Our economy is not knowledge based. And let me just give you quickly,
Please.
Google is based on a knowledge idea that comes out of Stanford. And what Google earns in 1 year, all our IT companies put together don't earn in 3 years. You see the difference? And Google's employees is 1/10 what our IT companies have. That's the power of a knowledge economy. So knowledge must enter into the economy. It's very important.
So we hope that the NEP brings knowledge economy to the country. Thank you, both of you, for participating in this debate, sir. And ma'am. This is all in the agenda today. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with another important topic tomorrow. Till then, goodbye.